violated. Yeah. Worldwide.
What is going on? Thank you for tuning in to the 159th edition of the MMA Podcast. It is February 19th, 2016. A bunch to break down. We weren't here last week, so we got to eat crow on that Wonder Boy versus Johnny Hendricks fight. Beautiful KO for Stephen Thompson brings him that much closer to a title shot. A bunch to break down this week. Of course, we got a week of MMA news, and this weekend we got two cards to break down. The Bellator card, headlined by Hoist and Ken Shamrock, along with Kimbo and Dada 5000. UFC card, Cowboy versus Cowboy. Donald Cerrone looking to get back in the win column after a lost title shot. Let's do it. Thanks for tuning in.
You're listening to the MMA Podcast.
That's right, it is the MMA Podcast. We apologize for not being around last week. Was having some major computer problems. It was overheating. I just needed to, I had to erase a bunch of stuff off of it, and I opened that up. There was so much dust in that motherfucker. I've had it for, I don't know, maybe 2 years now, and that stuff really accumulates. Apparently it's a fire risk too. I was looking that up on Google. So people who have desktops, make sure every year or two, you get a screwdriver and take the case off, get one of those pressurized air things. Don't snort it, but spray that shit down, because no huffing, people. I do not want our listeners to lose valuable brain cells. And if you do, use it on fun stuff like pot, not huffing air canisters. Come on, son. So yeah, blew it out, and it's not overheating and screwing up anymore. And I'm pumped for that. Pumped, you just heard him. Pumped to have our co-host on. You might know him as Sweet Pappy Jones. You might know him as P Money. You might know him as Jean-Luc Pimp Hard, which honestly I didn't understand that joke until 5 days later, talking to a friend who was like, yeah, Jean-Luc Pimp Hard, like Star Trek. I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, the bald guy is Jean-Luc Picard. I'm like, you fucking nerds. P-Money, you fucking nerd, dropping Star Trek references on the show. What the fuck's going on?
Man, this is Wu-Tang over here, son. You better protect your goddamn neck. This is super niche. Yes, it does require a certain level of nerdiness to get the reference at the first time, but you have to have a certain level of street/gutter to appreciate it as well. So, super niche reference there. Much love to the homie C. Lowenstein for picking up on that one. And psyched to get to this one with you. Like you said, we got a whole lot to break down from the Hendricks and Wonder Boy card and all the current goings on. So glad we're back and ready to do it. I'm recovering from a little illness myself, so I'm ready to go 100%.
Yeah, and I did want to mention, a couple days ago I tweeted out that there will be major changes to the format of the show. And I guess I'll address that now. We've been doing shows. I mean, if you go back a year, our shows were pushing 2 hours. And you've probably noticed the last few months we've toned it down a bit, being around an hour and a half. What we're gonna start doing, try and aim for the shows to be around an hour-ish, but we're gonna start doing 2 shows a week. I think we're going to try and aim for doing a Sunday show and a Thursday show. We'll probably keep doing the Thursday show. And the Thursday shows will probably be very similar to what they have been, maybe a little bit shorter. But the Sunday shows are going to be more of like a recap of the previous day's events, and we're only going to do them on Sundays, where there was a UFC the day before. Or I guess in this case, the day of. But, you know, I was thinking about it, and the one thing, I mean, I love doing the show, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to stop doing it anytime soon, but the one thing that was sort of bothering me a little bit was the fact that it was like a Thursday, and we would be breaking down a card that happened 5 days earlier. I just felt like, you know, no one really cared that much about the card, or was still talking about the results and the fallout from it like they were the day after. You know, the Sunday after a big Saturday night UFC card, you're ripe with talking about, you know, who should fight who next, the fallout of so-and-so winning, so-and-so losing. And yeah, so we're going to keep doing the Thursday shows every single week. And for the foreseeable future, I mean, unless homie gets hit by a bus or something, you will keep seeing Sweet Pappy Jones, or keep hearing Sweet Pappy Jones on the regular Thursday night shows. And for the Sunday show, we're going to bring back the original host, the guy who was on the MMA Podcast 1 to, I don't know when he stopped being as regular, but yeah, Chris Lowe, our boy on Twitter at C Lowenstein, he will be hopping back on and doing the Sunday recap shows with me. And, you know, you'll still hear from Ross Finkelstein, the Jew. I believe Ramses is going to start getting the word on the street podcast going again with Coach Jamie Huey. He has confirmed Chael Sonnen for the comeback episode. He hasn't. Yeah, he's been out for like 9 months with relocation and surgeries, and the guy is doing much better now. And I'm pretty sure the word on the street's going to be coming back very soon. I was just talking to Coach Jamie Huey about it the other day. But, yeah, that about encapsulates all the changes for the show. We're going to be doing those Sunday shows with Chris. Not that much will change. You know, the Sunday shows will probably be short, you know, around 40, 45 minutes. I don't know. But, yeah, I'm sort of trying to get fight recaps in a little bit earlier, and that doesn't mean, you know, me and Pat won't talk about the major events from a card, but as far as just breaking it down top to bottom, I feel like that's better for like immediately after the fights. And you know, last year we were doing like 2.5 hour shows, 3 hour shows. I mean, the biggest MMA podcast out there is probably the MMA Hour with Ariel Helwani, and the dude does like 4.5 hour shows. And as much as I want to hear these big interviews, and Ariel knows the sport really well, and I like hearing him talk about it, I just don't have the time to carve fucking 5 hours out of my day. So we're trying to trim it down a little bit, and everyone who has listened, is listening, we appreciate the shit out of you. We plan on having some big interviews in the future, like I mentioned, Aljamain Sterling. You know, we haven't had an interview in a while, so I definitely want to bring back old guests, Aljamain, Darren Cruikshank, maybe Misha Tate if I can get a hold of her, and new guests as well. It's always fun to have new people on the show. For sure going to try and get Ben Askren on. As a lot of you know, I've been producing his podcast, the T-Row and Funky Show, an amateur wrestling podcast. They talk mainly about NCAA level college wrestling. It's actually pretty interesting. And you can check that out by just following Ben on Twitter at Ben Askren. He tweets out the links to the podcast all the time. But I think that does it for talking about how the podcast is going to change. So we'll still have the magic going every Thursday. Don't worry, Pat. Speaking about the magic, dude, the magic apparently was not in the cards for us picking this Wonder Boy versus Johnny Hendricks fight. We had Alan on, our boy at Westland Eagle AH on the last show. We had him on to break down the card, and for that main event, we all agreed not only is Johnny Hendricks gonna beat Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, but he's gonna beat his ass. It's gonna be a 1 round. He's gonna whoop him. He's gonna mollywop him. Stephen Thompson has no chance. Bet on Johnny. Wonderboy goes out there. Boop. KOs Johnny. Ridiculous. I mean, Johnny, who had never been stopped before. Iron Chin Johnny. Wonderboy was just stylistically a nightmare matchup. Well, what did you think about this fight, man? It shocked the world.
Yeah, it really did. It shocked me too. This was one of those ones where you went back and you look at it almost like the Ronda Rousey fight where you're like, you know, if he gets it to the ground or when Ronda gets to the ground over Holly Holm, it's over. You know, the stand up is one thing, but the grappling, they're so far advanced and you start looking at, you know, I know myself, I was really looking at Johnny Hendricks' jaw. You know, I said, gosh, he's taking the best shots from some of the heaviest hitters, but the precision and accuracy of a multi-time kickboxing champion like Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is just a whole nother thing. Very similar again to the Ronda Rousey Holly Holm fight, where just world-class precision strikers who are able to stop that threat. And that's the thing, especially with Johnny Hendricks' wrestling credentials. I thought he was going to be able to mop the floor with Stephen Thompson. I mean, we saw what Matt Brown did to him. Granted, that was some time ago, and Stephen Thompson showed that he has shored up his takedown defense. He was able to nullify the ground threat from Johnny Hendricks, and he was able to employ his game to a T. It was a beautiful display. All the strikes were working for him. The kick, and if he put it on Johnny Hendricks, he was the one making a statement that night. That sure nobody ever had even dropped Johnny Hendricks in UFC competition. And Stephen Thompson was the first person to give him that TKO loss. It was an amazing display.
Yeah, and the real question afterwards is, what do you do with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson? You have the champion, Robbie Lawler. I feel like there are three options here. You give him Wonderboy next, you give him Woodley next, or you give him Condit next. And out of Woodley, Thompson, and Condit, whichever two don't get the title shot, fight each other for the next title shot. So personally, I would make Lawler versus Woodley and have Wonderboy and Condit. Sidebar, Wonderboy Condit, how fucking awesome would that fight be? You have Wonderboy Condit fighting in a title eliminator fight at 170. And I'm not even going to acknowledge this talk about Conor moving up to welterweight. And if the UFC lets him do it, it's a fucking joke. But yeah, I'm not going to take that seriously at all. I say Woodley still gets the next fight against Lawler, and you have Wonderboy fight Condit in a title eliminator. A lot of people are saying Wonderboy should get the next shot, though. What are you thinking?
I'm thinking Wonderboy should get that next shot. I really do, just based on the fact that I think Johnny Hendricks was the uncrowned champion of 170 pounds. He really should have still had that belt. You can say what you will about Johnny Hendricks and the decisions in his fights, but really, still should have had that belt. Tyron Woodley, granted, he's a beast, and styles make fights, and he's not an easy out by any means. He's got great hands, great power, good grappling game overall, but he has just not made it in the big fights. He's fallen short in the big fights. You look at the Marquardt loss, the Shields loss. Granted, that was another close one. The Rory McDonald fight, it just hasn't quite been there for him. Wonderboy just knocked out someone who had never even been dropped, who should have been the champion, and does have a pretty solid 6-fight winning streak besides that. Some good names on there. So I would not mind him being inserted in for that match whatsoever. Tyron, he's been on the sidelines for a little bit. I think he needs to get back in there, maybe extend that winning streak, and restate his case for the 170-pound title shot.
Yeah, and I don't think we've heard any real hints from the UFC as to who is going to get that title shot next, but will be interesting to see what happens. As far as the rest of the card, kind of a snoozer. Roy Nelson, Ovent St. Preux, Joseph Benavidez all win unanimous decisions. What did you take? We had Scoggins win, Derek Lewis with a first round TKO. The performance bonuses went to Stephen Thompson and Diego Rivas. Fight of the night, Pyle versus Spencer, which was a fun fight. Anything else you take from that card that happened a long ass time ago? This is the last time we're going to do a super belated fight recap. The rest will be day after, so don't worry about that. But let's wrap up the super belated fight breakdown. You take anything from any other fights that went down?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the Justin Scoggins versus Ray Borg fight. Scoggins, he came into the flyweight division with a lot of hype and had some setbacks to some more grappling-heavy opponents, although I want to say both of his losses were split decisions, and he did not have terrible showings. And in fact, thought he could have possibly won the Dustin Ortiz fight. But this fight with Ray Borg was quite decisive. He had the full array of strikes going on, great grappling, great control. He really showed some solid improvement. And then Misha Serkinov breaking Alex Nicholson's jaw. That was just a savage showing. You had to feel a little bit bad for Nicholson, who had just proposed to his girlfriend the night before the weigh-in. And here he was getting beaten to a bloody pulp and then getting his jaw snapped on national television. That was unfortunate, although if you're looking at the betting lines, that's pretty much the kind of fight you were expecting from such a heavy favorite in Serkinov, and he did not fail to deliver. So I found that fairly impressive myself. And yeah, as you mentioned, I mean, certainly the Roy Nelson, Jared Rosal fight, or not Jared Rosal, or no, yeah, that is who it was. My goodness, it was so boring. I can't even remember who fought. That was a kind of an unfortunate affair, but there was some decent action in between some snoozers.
Yeah, the prelims had a lot more action, which unfortunately I missed live. I went back and watched them, but man, Pyle started off. Him and Spencer were fun. Misha Serkunov, that was a impressive second round sub, but then you just had like an hour of boring ass fights. Stephen Thompson livened it back up though, and we'll see whether he gets that shot or not. And that brings us into the news. I'm not as prepared as usual. I don't have the clip queued up, but now I do. The news. And not the biggest week in MMA news, but a few things to talk about. The first of which being Bellator doing their own kickboxing thing now. They're going to put on a Bellator MMA and kickboxing, probably a little bit similar to that Dynamite card that they did with Glory. I think Melvin Manhoof will be on it. Pitbull, Frieri, who else? B. Raj, the Predator, Brian Rogers. A few other people, but Bellator, I guess, looking to give Glory a little competition. Glory, which in other news, I think recently in the last couple weeks since our last show, Glory, kickboxing, and Eddie Bravo Invitational Jiu-Jitsu, both joining the UFC Fight Pass family. So Glory sort of teaming up with the UFC. Not as closely, obviously, as Bellator kickboxing will be with Bellator, but Bellator doing their own kickboxing now. Do you think they're going to be successful doing that? I mean, they seem to have a few big names in Melvin Manhoof, Joe Schilling. He seems to be a decent draw. What do you think about Bellator doing their own kickboxing show?
Well, I think they will have their typical level of success just by virtue of the vehicle that they have with Spike TV and the backing that they have through Viacom. I really foresee them being, though, I mean, it's Bellator kickboxing, so look at what you're getting with Bellator MMA right now. Lots of freak show fights. It's almost like what the UFC's been doing, but just to an even more shameless level of, we're just the freak show fights, not competitive matchups. They do have some signings, but I mean, Thrilling Joe Schilling, solid kickboxer, perhaps a little overrated. Melvin Manhoof, he's a solid name, but even he's not really competing at the highest levels. We've seen that from him in his kickboxing career as of late. So, they've got a couple names, though. I really feel like this, especially now with Glory teaming up with Fight Pass, I mean, I think that's going to be outstanding. I think that they've got the majority of the names. They've got the reputation amongst the kickboxing community already. So I really think that they'll continue to be the go-to name for kickboxing. But, getting more combat sports out there is never a bad thing. I think they'll continue to, I think they'll be the number 2 kickboxing organization in the world, or at least in the States on televised TV. But if they can help grow combat sports, and more power to them.
Yeah, Scott Coker seems to be well equipped as far as running the show. So, as much as Glory has struggled, and that would be my biggest concern, that kickboxing, for some reason or another, seems to have a little bit of a trouble finding a sturdy foothold in America. But if they can make it work, Coker's the guy. So, I definitely wish him the best. I love kickboxing, so I hope they do well. Moving on, a little bit darker news. Ronda Rousey going on the Ellen Show, saying after she lost to Holly Holm, she considered suicide. We saw a lot of responses to this. Some of them not so serious. Some of them just downright disrespectful. It's obviously no joke, especially when, given Ronda's past of, her dad killing herself when she was a kid. I think if she just stopped it there, people would have maybe clowned her a little less for it. But the fact that she followed it up with, I was gonna kill, I was thinking about killing myself in the locker room, and then I look up and I see Travis Brown, and I think, I need to live. I need to have his babies or something. And I think that kind of turned a lot of people off. But regardless, it's a serious topic. And my only 2 cents on it were whether this was caused by, brain damage from just being a fighter. She's been a judokan, a high-level one, her whole life. And I'm sure she's gotten tossed on her head a bunch of times. Being punched isn't the only way to bang your head around, and I'm sure playing the judo game for a long time, she's probably conked her head on the fucking mat more times than you can count. So whether it's brain damage, whether it's just over emotion, I think you gotta consider retiring. If you lose a fight and it brings you down so much that you think about killing yourself. And obviously, Ronda will probably keep fighting, and I doubt that she only loses one fight in her whole career. I actually think she has a good chance of being champ again, but that doesn't mean she never loses again. And if she loses again, the bite will probably be a little less harsh because she's now been through it. But at the same time, you either need to retire or you need to really do auditing and accounting of how many eggs you're putting in this fighting basket, and how, as much as I was overjoyed to hear Dominic Cruz after the Dillashaw fight, after getting his belt back, saying, being asked, is this the best night of your life? And Cruz going, no, the best night of my life was realizing that I didn't need the belt to be happy. That's the awesome side of it. Cruz saying that, fucking awesome. And the other side of the spectrum is Ronda saying she wanted to kill herself when she lost the belt. Maybe Cruz can mentor her. I know they're both in Cali. I don't know, but it sounds like there probably needs to be a lot of time taken off and a sort of auditing done as how many eggs she's putting in this fighting basket. What did you make of those comments, Pat? Jean-Luc?
I mean, that's... I felt like it's a very understandable emotion. Really, when you think about, you have to empathize with Ronda Rousey and put yourself in her situation. Now, granted, she had lost before. I mean, she had lost in judo. She did not win the gold medal in the Olympics. She won the bronze. So she has been at the top level, but yet still knows what defeat was. However, never in the mixed martial arts game had she lost. And she came over, she created a sensation. She was, I dare say, bigger than Gina Carano ever was. Although Gina Carano was huge, and Carano versus Cyborg was huge.
Way bigger, way bigger. Ronda easily the biggest. I mean, she's maybe, aside from Brock Lesnar and maybe GSP, I think Brock, her, and GSP are probably the biggest stars in the sport, period.
Oh, yeah. Certainly, but I do think people often forget how big Gina Carano was, because Gina Carano, not only did she get movie gigs, she got some legit movie gigs, not like Expendables 3, but like some serious movies with some clout.
Whoa, bro. Are you saying Expendables 3 is not a legit movie? Hold on. Are you saying Fast and the Furious 42 is not a legitimate movie? Entourage?
No, I'm not.
That motherfucker won Grammys, Oscars, whatever they give out for movies. Oscars.
I mean, Entourage, I'll give Entourage something, because they're bringing something original and fresh. But I'm just saying, Gina Carano, she was big for her time, and the numbers for her fight with Cyborg were something large, and that was the only fight she'd ever lost in MMA. And she never came back to fight again. She just kept doing the movies. Now, Ronda, she says she's going to come back and she's going to keep fighting. I hope she does, because really, I'm sure part of this was just the fact that, you have to imagine she had never lost in MMA. She had lost before, but this is a completely different sport. You lose a judo match, you're not getting your teeth knocked through your throat on the mat, at least not intentionally or in any kind of way. This happened in front of 55,000 people in an arena, millions of people watching on TV live everywhere. This story broke the internet, the memes of her, all the articles. I mean, my goodness, you can only imagine feeling like everybody in the world was so glad to see you do it. And a lot of people were vocal about it on the internet. I can't even begin to comprehend the kind of stress that would put on a human psyche. So, I can only imagine that would be a thought that you would go to. I mean, especially, as it's been well documented, her past. But she's a strong individual, and, that probably is just an extreme emotional swing, probably from a combination of factors, the past history, as well as just, you mentioned, Jake, the brain trauma, because that's certainly occurred in that fight, and typically does anytime you get knocked out. So, just all the media pressure, the physiological damage that she had taken. I mean, I was not surprised to hear that she had those thoughts. Thank goodness, she's a strong woman and didn't act on those thoughts.
Yeah, and man, that would have been a fucking tragedy. We'll see when she comes back. We'll see how she's able to manage her career. I hope she comes back. I hope she, gets a rematch against Holm or whoever's got the belt. But more importantly, I hope she's able to sort out her mental health demons, whatever is going on there. Speaking of hard times for UFC legends, BJ Penn, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but apparently one of his former employees, he gets fired, and his former employee comes out with all these allegations saying, I wasn't home, and BJ Penn came to my house, and he, like, sexually assaulted my Playboy model girlfriend, which he's actually, like, phrased it like that. Yeah, he tried to throw himself on my Playboy model girlfriend. Definitely a few parts of it raised an eyebrow. And then you have journalists who are just muddling the entire thing. Usually he writes good stuff, but Jeremy Botter, like this afternoon, tweeting, "Oh, I spoke to the accuser and I believe him, and he has evidence, and I've seen this evidence," and then tonight tweeting, "I talked to BJ Penn and I believe his side of the story and he's shown me counter evidence." He used evidence in both tweets like he's a fucking private investigator or something. Like it's all getting very muddled. Apparently there's been an official police report filed within the major 48 states by either the accuser or his girlfriend, and they're forwarding that to the Hilo, Hawaii Police Department, and there will be an investigation. And, it sucks, because I obviously hope that nobody got sexually assaulted, and it's always sort of embarrassing for both sides in this whole he said, she said situation. B, selfishly, if you've listened to the podcast for any amount of time, Penn is my favorite fighter of all time, so that would suck to have to figure out who my new favorite fighter of all time is because my old one is a scumbag. So, I hope both for Penn and for the alleged victim, I hope it never happened, but if it did, I obviously hope justice is served to him. It's just, I hate when media and journalists, quote unquote journalists, if it's a legitimate fight story and you're trying to find out about drug tests or matchmaking or something relating to a fight, that's one thing. But this is TMZ bullshit. This is who's going to file a report and who said what and who's right and who's lying. A police report's been filed. The police are going to sort this out. And when they do, we'll find out. We'll find out, hey, has Penn been cleared? Will Penn be indicted? It will sort itself out. We don't need the media sticking their nose where it doesn't belong, trying to break the story 2 days before it's public news, and the media in cases like this just muddle it up, bring shame to both sides. We'll see it sorted out. What were your reactions? I mean, I didn't want to spend too much time on it, and I guess I sort of am, but just stories like this make me a little more, I don't know if critical is the right word, but just, media can be shady sometimes.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And really, especially when it comes to this is accusations at this point. This is a bitter former employee. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. That's I don't want to speculate myself. But for me, if I have any grievances in my workplace or with the boss, I will air them at the time. I'm not one to just sit around and let things go.
Especially if it's something as serious as, hey, you raped/tried to rape my girlfriend. Like, what?
Right. No, that's when immediate police interference is done. I can't even comprehend that. And then to come out, because he also came out and said, "Oh, I've known BJ Penn like our whole lives, basically. I grew up with this guy." And guess what? He's had a nasty blow habit like forever. I mean, that is just a low blow. You are just now at this point, I mean, is that a crime? Well, yeah, probably. I mean, just the possession part. But you're just going out of your way to drag this person's name through the mud. and had no problem when you were on his payroll as an employee of his, and then the moment the gravy train stops, you want to drag his name through the mud. No, that's you are lowering yourself, even if that is true, which none of that has proven to be true. There will be a day in court for all this, and until that day, it's really reckless to even acknowledge these accusations. I'm kind of dumbfounded by the whole thing. Like you, just hope it's not true. I mean, I never want to see people in the mixed martial arts community drawing this kind of attention to themselves and the sport. And really, I mean, hey, human beings behaving bad, that's just never fun to see. So I hope these reports are unfounded, because that would be quite the shame.
Yeah, we'll probably see the story unfold in the next few weeks. Speaking of weights, Penn, a famous lightweight, and we got a lightweight fight scheduled. A little lighter news: Edson Barboza is going to be taking on Anthony Pettis. Props to Pettis for fighting more than one time in a calendar year. Pettis, I think his last fight was he lost to Eddie Alvarez in 2016. If he does fight again in 2016, this is the first time since 2013 he's fought twice in a year. He fought once in 2012, once in 2012, once in 2014, once in 2015. Already looking to get back in the cage. Good for him. Against Edson Barboza. Flashy striker. He's a black belt in Taekwondo and has thrown up some amazing knockouts. The one against the KO... what is the one? Terry Edom. That wheel kick that made him fucking crash like a statue. Taking on Anthony Pettis. I'll let you give your pick on it before me. Who do you have in this matchup between Showtime and does Barboza have a nickname, Junior or something? The 30-year-old Barboza taking on the 29-year-old Pettis.
Yeah, you know what? I'm kind of smelling upset in this one. I see a lot of people riding that Pettis dick real hard right about now, saying, oh, Pettis. I've even seen some people say Pettis is going to win easily. I'm not quite sure what dimension they're living in. Pettis has a fantastic stand-up, and he's got legit grappling chops to back it up. We did see Edson Barboza just get finished by a Darce choke by El Cucuy, Tony Ferguson. But that fight, I mean, that was a spectacular back-and-forth fight, and there was a pretty serious foul that Edson Barboza had incurred that, I mean, really could have changed the pace of the fight. There was a point deduction there, and I think Edson was probably hurt pretty good from that. It was just a war of a fight, and you know, people talk about, oh, Barboza's chin. He took a lot of good shots in that fight. And he's certainly taken some good shots since, let's say, the Donald Cerrone TKO loss. I think Edson Barboza, he's making strides and he's making improvements. And Anthony Pettis, we've kind of, we've seen him, I mean, of course, we've seen the Clay Guida type strategy be employed before. But this is a guy in Edson Barboza who may just have at least enough in the grappling department to keep it from going to the ground. And Barboza, I believe, is going to have a pretty good height and reach advantage over Pettis. He is a taller and lankier 155-pounder, if I'm envisioning it correctly in my head. And his striking style, my goodness, I would dare say he looks to have a bit more pop on his strikes than Anthony Pettis does. Anthony Pettis, he's a tactician. He can place those shots perfectly, and he's got some pop on it. But I think that Edson Barboza, he's just a little bit more powerful. I mean, those kicks, he's sending them from everywhere. It's going to be a sick fight, and I'm thinking Barboza has what it takes to get it done.
I'm actually taking Pettis here. Pettis now, he's lost back-to-back fights against Rafael Dos Anjos and Eddie Alvarez. It's that offensive wrestling that Eddie and RDA have that I don't know if Edson has enough of to beat Pettis. You know, you don't necessarily want to take Pettis all the way to the mat all the time because his jiu-jitsu is great. He's obviously a great striker. I think he's a little bit better a striker than Barboza, but it's close. I think you're right in that Barboza has the power. He has some leg kicks from hell. But Pettis, I think, is better standing up. And I don't think Barboza has the offensive wrestling that Eddie and Rafael used to neutralize Pettis. For those reasons, I have Pettis getting back in the win column here. And if he's not able to, man, what a fall from grace. Being the champion, having won, the belt from Bindo, defending it against Melendez, the guys on the Wheaties box, the Corn Nuts box, he's everywhere. And next thing you know, he's on a 3-fight skid. So it's I think much more important for Pettis than Barboza to win this fight. And I think for that reason too, Pettis is going to be a little more desperate. And in fights where it's really close, like this, a lot of times you see the desperate guy winning the fight. So we'll see what goes down there. Another bit of news, Vanderlei Silva, his lifetime ban lifted. He got a lifetime ban after a whole slew of things from him running from a drug test, mainly surrounding that and not taking it. Banned for life. That ban has been lifted. Turned into a 3-year ban, which will apparently expire, I guess, in 2017, you were saying, Pat? 2017 at some point? I think his last fight you said was 2014.
Yeah, should be like May-ish 2017, okay. So, I mean, really just about a little over a year from now.
Yeah, what do you think is next for Vanderlei? Does he come back? Does he fight again? If so, is it with the UFC, with Bellator? You called it the Bellator Senior Division before the podcast. What are your thoughts on the future for one of the biggest fighters of all time, biggest names ever, Vanderlei Silva?
Oh man, no, we were joking a little bit about that before the podcast, but I really do think that is the case. If Vanderlei Silva comes back to fighting next year, it'll probably be for Bellator. I mean, he's been doing like the media thing with them, I want to say. It seems like he's in cahoots over there, so I would not doubt that if Vanderlei Silva does fight again, it'd be under the Bellator umbrella. They have been getting some more UFC guys as of late, and they love those freak show fights. Bellator just recently got Rampage back as well. So now that he's back, I mean, hey, who knows? They'll do number 4. I would not doubt that they would set up Rampage versus Vanderlei number 4. And I'm sure Rampage would love to go or try and go 2-2 with Vanderlei and even things up. So I think that would be the logical place. If he does come back, I think that's probably where he's ended up, especially because Vanderlei was also trying to throw those fight fixing allegations real quick on the UFC. Then he was backpedaling on that real quick. He's like, oh, no, I'm sorry, I didn't say that. So, I think if he comes back and fights, he's going to be with Bellator.
Vanderlei Silva, old Juan going to Bellator. Speaking of Bellator, we have a Bellator card to break down in just a second here. Really quick, wanted to mention 2 things. Rest in peace, Kevin Randleman, the former Ohio State wrestler, UFC champion. Kevin Randleman dies in his 40s. I think it was a heart issue, so definitely thoughts and prayers to friends and family of Kevin Randleman. In lighter news, Aljamain Sterling and Alistair Overeem re-signed by the UFC. Both of them brought back. Really pumped about Aljo being able to stay in the UFC, gun for that bantamweight title. We've had him on twice. The first time was before he even got signed by the UFC. We were one of the ones pushing for him to get signed. He got signed. He got re-signed. And we hope to have him on a third time once he gets a fight schedule to talk about that fight and talk about what it's been like rising to the top. Bellator 149. A lot of fights on it. You got Justin Wren, the Big Pygmy, versus Juan Torres. Melvin Gillard versus Derek Campos. Manuel Sanchez, Daniel Pineda. Emmanuel Newton versus Linton Vassell. Other than the main and co-main event, anything standing out for you? Any fights you're especially looking forward to?
Oh, you know what? I hate to say not really, Jake. But this
I'm
really
with you, man.
This is a prime Bellator card right here. Just seemingly uneven matchups. The favorites are probably just going to have nice little performances, and then we're going to have a couple old-timer freak show fights. There's really not a whole lot jumping off the page. I mean, really, I just hope it'll be an entertaining fight. You know, I hope Melvin Gillard knocks out his opponent. Like to see the Big Pygmy get a win in the heavyweight division, but nothing super relevant that's just screaming to me, oh man, I can't wait to watch this fight.
Yeah, there really isn't anything. Maybe just, you know, if I'm not doing anything and I'm bored, I'll probably watch it live. I'll DVR it to fast forward through it maybe. But yeah, I'm interested just to see how Wren, Gillard, and Newton do. But aside from that, the only two fights I'll probably semi-interested. I don't know. It is the sideshow Bellator card folks have been talking about. Shamrock, Hoist, both of them old as hell. Ken Shamrock and Hoist Gracie. Yes, that Ken Shamrock. Yes, that Hoist Gracie. The two men that fought one another at UFC 5. I mean, these are the first two stars the UFC saw. Hoist is now 49 years old. Ken is 52. I don't even know what weight it's gonna be at, because as far as I know, Ken was always like big, like 6'1", 230, 240, and Hoist was like a little like 5'11", 170-pound guy. So not sure what weight it'll be at. It's a sideshow, whatever. But let's start off with Kevin Ferguson, aka Kimbo Slice, and Dafir Harris, a.k.a. Dada 5000, the guy we actually had on last year. I spoke with him for 45 minutes, mainly about the fight promotion that he was putting on, Backyard Brawling, and the documentary that's on Netflix still, basically about him, called Dogfight, him and the fights that he put on in the backyard of his mother's house in Parine, Florida, a neighboring city to Miami. Kimbo Slice, Dada 5000. Before we get into, or I don't know, I guess we can talk about it after, but I don't know. This is a very one-sided fight. You have Kimbo, who, yes, I guess he's green. He's only been doing this for 4 or 5 years. He started with tough, but he's gotten a lot better. He's a strong guy. He's been doing it for a while now. He's 5-2. He's learned boxing. He's learned jiu-jitsu. His 2 losses were to Seth Petrozelli and Matt Mitrione, which, Meathead is a legit fighter. Petrozelli is a legit fighter. Those are his only 2 losses. He beat Ken Shamrock in what was probably a work. And he's fighting Dada 5000, who's 2-0, both of his wins against absolute no-names. You see him at open workouts, and the guy strikes like somebody who hasn't been training technique very long at all. Very sloppy strikes. Kimbo was a giant favorite. We'll talk about the way the line swung, because that's a whole nother story. But, yeah, I mean, obviously I'm leaning toward Kimbo. And we can save whether we'll talk about the sideshow aspect after we talk about Shamrock Gracie. But which way are you leaning between Kimbo and Dada?
Well, for me, we talked about it a little bit before the show. I really don't know anything about DeFear Harris. I'm not familiar with him or his Dada 5000. I've never seen any of his backyard fights. Not familiar with the documentary. But just what I've seen from Kimbo, even though he has trained, and I mean, he fought Seth Petrozelli back in the Elite XC days, which, gosh, I want to say that had to be at least 2010, maybe, or something like that, maybe about 5 years ago now. It's not a little bit more than that, maybe '08. So he's been around the block now. He's done the boxing thing. He had a few boxing matches. Speaking of alleged works, check some of that out. There's one fight in particular. I want to say it was his fourth fight. Just saying. I really feel that anybody with some I mean, we've seen backyard brawls where Kimbo Slice has gotten beaten. So, as unfamiliar as I am with DeFear Harris, I give him a shot at plus 300 against Kimbo, just because even with all the training, everything I've seen, I've never been super impressed with Kimbo in a mixed martial arts or boxing capacity. He does not appear to have the polish of someone that's really trained. I mean, his punches are at least coming together a little better, but I mean, let's not kid ourselves about the caliber of boxer that we're talking about here. Kimbo is a backyard brawler who's been trying to pick up the sport. God bless him. And it appears Dada 5000 is trying to do the same. I have this as a coin toss, but that's my ignorance of DeFear's skills that are talking.
You still with us, Pat?
I'm still with you.
Okay, sorry. I had some audio issues over here. Yeah, you know, the fight, I don't know, you can call it a sideshow. It sort of is. I don't know, it's a co-main event, but you know, I'm very torn. I'm going to watch it. It's entertainment, but man, it's definitely, I feel guilty a little bit as an MMA fan watching it. And there's a whole nother story, which is the betting on this. Apparently, it was very skewed toward Kimbo Slice, and then 3 or 4 guys come into the Las Vegas Superbook and just like 20 times bet the max on Dada over and 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 over. Ben Askren said it best. If you go in and you're betting tons of money on Dada 5000, it's one of two things. Either 1, you're insane, or 2, you're in the know. In the know, meaning you know the fight's going to be a work and the underdog's going to throw the fight and win the fight. And there have been a lot of tweets, FRB, saying, I can't wait for Kimbo and Dada, the line movements, Dada not even being able to hit mitts. Something is up. I retweeted some tweets from Brett Akamoto saying, spoke to the manager at Las Vegas Sportsbook. Betting line for Kimbo moved from 360 to even today. Another round of bets on Dada 5000 by same 3-4 individuals at Las Vegas Superbook takes the slice line back to a pick'em right now. Wow. Quote, for a Bellator fight, Las Vegas Sportsbook has taken in, quote, an unheard amount of money, according to the manager. FRB tweeting, let's remember, to be a fixed fight, the promoter doesn't have to be involved. This is getting juicy, and if Dada wins, it's going to get even juicier. I actually went on Bovada to see if there was still a good underdog line for Dada, maybe put a few bucks down on it. They had closed betting on that fight. So some fuckery is afoot. Last time we thought fuckery was afoot was for that UFC card over in Asia, where the line flipped at the last second, and it turned out not to be anything. The fight was not a work, but people smelling something fishy with this Dada fight. Are you smelling anything fishy in the waters?
Myself personally, I'm not at this moment right now, just because for me, as a bettor, sometimes there are people that I will just bet against just because, and this could be one of those situations where it's like, it doesn't even matter who's in the ring because this guy stinks so bad, pretty much anybody off the street can beat him. So, who knows, maybe somebody's just betting along those kinds of lines, or maybe these are people that know Dada 5000. Who knows, maybe DeFeer was kind of breaking it at the open workouts and just trying to make himself look like a bum. Maybe he's trying to bump that lineup, because I know Big John McCarthy himself said he's not against a fighter betting on themselves in MMA. So, hey, maybe this guy, he says, you know what, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to smoke Kimbo. I'm going to show up at these open workouts. I'm just going to look like a bum. I'm going to put on this crap-ass performance, see if I can really pad that line, and then I'm just going to have the homies double down, really come up on this performance. Who knows? Maybe we see something like that where, he's just rope-a-doping and comes out swinging, throwing some heat. I think that's probably the more likely scenario, but definitely adds a level of interest. I mean, who the hell knows? Maybe these are Spike executives going down there. They've got a budget for their production on this. Maybe they're just going down to Vegas and creating this whole thing and creating a story to get extra views for the fight, not really caring about who wins. I mean, I think there's a few different scenarios before we start going the nefarious route on this one.
We will see tomorrow night on Spike what happens with that fight and Shamrock versus Hoist Gracie. You got Hoist Gracie, who's fought like a handful of times since '95. His last fight was in '07. I mean, shit, man. I wasn't even old enough to like vote last time that Hoist fought, and now I'm about to vote in my third presidential election. And this is the first time Hoist has fought in that entire period. Ken Shamrock has fought since 2010 once, and it was that work I was talking about against Kimbo Slice. This is gonna be sloppy. This is gonna be sad. This is gonna be a pointless trilogy. I don't know, man. I'm hating on something I'm gonna watch, so I don't know if that's hypocritical or not. Slice versus Dada, Shamrock versus Hoist. I'm going to be watching it, but I'm going to be rolling my eyes the whole time. They're putting a card around just strictly names, not talent, just names. I mean, this is like tuning into a football game between a bunch of 50-year-old guys. I mean, literally, Ken and Hoist are both 50. Doesn't really have any ramifications at the elite level of the sport, at the championship level. I mean, we know any top 10 guy at whatever weight class they're fighting at would smash Hoist or Ken in the first round. The same probably with Kimbo and Dada. I mean, not even your champion. You put a guy like, I don't know, like Ben Rothwell up against Dada or Kimbo, the fight ends in less than a minute. And I think that's going to be a heavyweight fight. But, I mean, the same at 205. You take a top 10 guy. These are fighters who are not anywhere near the pinnacle of our sport right now. But it's just name recognition. It's exploitative. But then again, how exploitative is it if these guys are getting paid and they're willing to do it? So you can't really, hate on it as long as it's voluntary. And Hoist and Ken are coming in at even odds, and people don't don't seem to be sure at all how it'll be ended. There are lines every way for who will win and whether it'll be by decision or inside the distance. I'll go ahead and pick a Gracie submission, because why not? What are you taking in this absolute sham of a main event that we're promoting and talking about, and I'm probably going to watch?
Well, it's such a shame. It is such a shame that we are giving this extra promotion to Bellator. And really, you know what? Hats off to them, because typically Bellator events come and go. When was the last time we gave this much time to Bellator on our podcast? Honestly, we used to give it a lot, especially when they had the tournament format. But over the years, their coverage on our part has steadily declined. But they got us talking about it, and you know what? I just might actually tune in tomorrow night to watch these fights, just because it is such a Travis Shamrock of a card. It's that train wreck you can't turn your eyes away from. I mean, Ken Shamrock versus Royce Gracie, their combined age is 101 years old. These are the fighters we're going to be expected to watch tomorrow night in the main event. Royce Gracie, his last fight in 2007 that you alluded to, he won, although he did piss red hot after that fight. For some reason, the official result was not overturned. They just wanted to give him a gift, I suppose, let him go off on that dubious note. Prior to that, though, it was almost 10 years ago when he last fought in the UFC. I want to say it was May of 2006 against Matt Hughes in a fight he had no business being in, when he got his shit pushed in front of a anxiously awaiting audience. That fight was a massacre. But again, combined age of these two contestants is 101 years old. I want to say Royce is 49 and Ken is 52. Really, it's how do you even compare to what you used to be a decade or even 5 years prior once you start getting that far up in age? I'm sure Ken wishes he was 47 going into this fight as opposed to 52. I mean, it's even for a reason. This is a coin flip of a match. But hey, doing MMA math, Royce Gracie does have a win previously, so why not? I'll go ahead and go with Royce too.
And going by our picks last podcast, that means that Ken Shamrock will get a first round knockout. I guess that does it for Bellator 149. So I'll turn my eyes to this UFC Fight Night card. Cowboy versus Cowboy, Donald Cerrone versus Alex Oliveira. The prelims, you have not the biggest fights ever, not the most stacked prelim card I've ever seen in my life. This going down at the Consol Energy Center in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We were originally supposed to see Cerrone Means, but Means dropped out due to a failed drug test. That happened February 3rd, I believe. Still under review, but because there's insufficient time for a full review, Means was pulled from the fight. And Alex Oliveira, the Brazilian Cowboy, they both wear the hat and I think come out to the same song, which will be funny to see. The two Cowboys facing off. As far as I see it, the loser can't be the Cowboy anymore. I'm sorry. No more wearing the hat. No more walkout music. Find another gimmick. There's only room for one Cowboy in the welterweight division, which is another note. Donald Cerrone will be making his debut at 170. But on the prelims, not too much going on. Marion Renault taking on Ashley Evans Smith. The main event of the Fox Sports 1 prelims is Alex Garcia, Sean Strickland. He got Daniel Sarafian, Alawali Bambagose. Any fights standing out for you before we move up to the main card?
Well, there's going to be a couple good ones on this fight. Daniel Sarafian from tough tough Brazil fame. I believe he was on the first season. He's moving back up to 185 pounds. Going to look to see how he's doing there. Alex Garcia versus Sean Strickland. That's definitely the feature prelim on this list for a reason. Both some solid prospects at 170 pounds. Both some good young talent, especially Sean Strickland. He's got a good long frame for 170. Seems to have a pretty good skill set. Still young, still green. Alex Garcia, the Dominican Nightmare, he looks to have the complete package already. Good striking, good grappling, solid heavy hands. Looking forward to that one. So should be some decent fights coming up on the prelims. Marion Renault also going to look to see how she does. Couple good women's bantamweight fights there. Good to have some more depth to the ladies divisions as always. So gotta love the ladies fighting.
Ooh, sorry about that. I just violently ripped the earbud out of my ear, but I will edit that awkward silence out in post. And maybe this, if I remember, but maybe not. I might leave all of this in. That brings us to the main card. I guess let's do everything but the main event. We got 6 fights all on the main card on Fox Sports 1. This is a Sunday card, people, so don't plan your Saturday around a UFC fight, then realize you fucked yourself over and the fight's actually Sunday. It starts 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. We got 6 fights. We'll break down 5 of them now. A lightweight fight between 2 guys who have proven to be game. Shane Campbell with that kickboxing background versus James Krause, who has an all-around great game. The odds are pretty close on this one, but I'm taking Krause. You have Chris Camozzi versus Joe Riggs. Riggs seems like, the only way he's really going to be able to finish this fight is by outstriking Chris or finishing him, and Chris has an iron chin. I think he has the tools it takes to clinch him up, maybe get it to the ground. I'm taking Chris Camozzi here. He's a big favorite. Another big favorite, Dennis Bermudez, taking on Tetsuya Kawajiri. Style-wise, strength and athleticism-wise, I think Dennis Bermudez is the better fighter, but the one weakness he's shown is in fights, an opponent will find one thing that works against Dennis, and Dennis can't adjust his game plan, and he just gets taken advantage of once, he gets sort of figured out and can't really game plan on the fly. Crusher can find something to get him with. You never know. Cody Garbrandt against Augusto Mendez. This is a fight I think Garbrandt has the tools to keep it standing and will outstrike and finish Mendez early. Brunson versus Ron Carnero, same thing. The only real chance Brunson has to lose is being taken down and subbed out, and Brunson's takedown defense is way too good against the Brazilian. I think he keeps it standing, and either we see a finish or a boring one-sided decision where Brunson just outstrikes the hell out of Carnero. And we'll save the main event for the final topic of the evening. But what are you thinking about this main event? Anything standing out for you?
Yeah, it should be a solid night of a main card. James Krause versus Shane Campbell. I mean, as you alluded to, Campbell has a good striking background. Krause has some good striking himself, definitely well-rounded. But Krause, he's been real up and down. Granted, Shane Campbell, he's only 1-1 in the UFC, but he does have a win in the World Series of Fighting as well. And that one loss was a very short-notice fight against John McAfee, if I recall correctly. At least that was a short-notice fight. So full training camp in this one for James Krause. I won't say it's been a little bit since we've seen Krause in there. Interesting to see how they mix up. I'm certainly taking Camozzi over Riggs in this one. Riggs did have some good moments against Ronald Stallings. That was a very interesting fight, how that ended up playing out, how he got the win via DQ. He was putting in some good work with some ground and pound against Stallings there before that illegal up kick ended the fight. But Camozzi, I like the way Camosi fights. He should have a significant height and reach in this one. He's got heart, and I think he's got what it takes to take out the Diesel in this one. And I'm actually with you, kind of smelling the upset against with Dennis Bermudez versus Tetsuya Kawajiri. I don't know, maybe if it's just my Jeremy Stevens pick over Dennis Bermudez that has me feeling it, but the Crusher is a solid opponent. He's solid at the 145-pound weight class. Does have some good grappling chops. Probably not up to where Dennis Bermudez grappling is at. And Dennis Bermudez really has come a long way in his striking as well. He's really become more of an 8-point striker, really mixing everything, the elbows and the knees as well as the hands. But Kawajiri, he's got some power. And Dennis Bermudez, even though I believe he's only got one TKO loss on his record, he does kind of have the Eddie Alvarez thing where he does get dropped a lot in his fights. He almost gets dropped every time. Much like Eddie Alvarez, even if it's a fight he wins, very often he's getting dropped. And that's always a dangerous thing in this sport. And I think Kawajiri, especially the size dog he is, he could be a live one here. Cody Garbrandt getting the Lenos and Augusto Mendes. Mendes, a very high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu competitor. Very high level for the lighter weight class. So this is an interesting short-notice fight. Cody Garbrandt, though, seems to really be a solid prospect in the bantamweight division. He's over there with Team Alpha Male, so you know he's getting his rolling on. He's got to have that good takedown defense. And he's fought a few times in the UFC, so this is nothing new for him. He's got the experience on his side. Got to roll with him. And also roll with Brunson over Carnero. I mean, Brunson was out-grappling Yoel Romero in his fight up until Yoel Romero hit him with some savageness late in the third round, needed to get the stoppage, and did get the stoppage against Derek Brunson. But Brunson, he's athletic. He's good everywhere. Super solid talent at 185 pounds. Carnero looked good, but that was against a Munoz that was on the verge of retirement. And was essentially retired going into that fight, even though Munoz did fight one more time after that against Luke Barnett. But I think Derek Brunson is a solid pick in this fight. Carnero's a good opponent, but I just think he's past his prime. And Derek Brunson is the future at 185 pounds. Solid talent there, so I'm rolling with Derek for sure.
That brings us to our last topic, Cowboy versus Cowboy, Oliveira against Cerrone. And to me, this is just another very one-sided fight. I mean, just look at the experience of both guys, and not that Oliveira won't eventually get that. You know, he's 27, has a seemingly long career in front of him because he's a great fighter. It looks like Cerrone is just at the point in his career where he's evolved. He's had the chance to learn, evolve, and do and become a better fighter than the Brazilian. Not that I think there might be a moment in the fight where Cerrone gets stunned. We've seen Cerrone, you know, have moments where his opponent seems to, break through. I think the fact that this is a 5-rounder helps Donald. I think the longer the fight goes, the more it tilts toward Cerrone. The Brazilian does have some impressive wins, you know. A first-round rear-naked choke against KJ Nunes last year. A win against Peter Hallman, his last fight last November. A KO that earned him $50K. He's a dangerous fighter, but Cerrone is just another level. He just fought for the title. Before that, he had 8 straight wins against guys like Eddie Alvarez. I mean, he put it to Eddie Alvarez, who now is sniffing around for a title shot. Benson, John McDessie, the aforementioned Edson Barbosa. I mean, the guy's the real deal, and I'm taking Cerrone here without a doubt. We didn't get it right last podcast, but I'm pretty sure we're getting it right on this one, taking the favorite Donald Cerrone over the young Brazilian Alex Oliveira in a match between two Cowboys, Cowboy versus Cowboy. Who are you taking?
Jake, you know what? I'm actually almost tempted to go with Cowboy in this one.
Oh, no.
Oliveira.
Don't do it.
Oh, yeah. You know what? I mean, granted, Cowboy, he's been at the top tier for so long now, and as you mentioned, just continues to refine his craft. But this Cowboy, old Alex Oliveira, he's shown a lot of promise as a young talent. Does have 3 wins in a row after suffering a setback to, I believe, world champion grappler Gilbert Burns. Very, very dangerous guy on the ground. And bounced right back with that first-round submission over KJ Nunes. No slouch, and not an easy second fight, especially after losing your first in the UFC. So Oliver, he's definitely shown an ability to overcome there. And as you mentioned, that knockout over Peter Hallman in the third round of his last fight, that was a sweet knockout there. So looks like he's getting into his own. Granted, Donald Cowboy Cerrone has probably fought more times in the last 4 months than Oliveira has in the whole duration of his UFC tenure. But man, I really like his skill set overall. I think he's a good talent, and really, I think he's right there, has the capability to be right up there with where Donald Cowboy Cerrone is at. I think he can reach a similar level of success in the UFC. Because let's face it, as entertaining as Donald Cerrone is, even he said at this point, he's not even really thinking about the belt. He's just going out there and looking for challenges. Because he is checks. Basically, he's looking for checks, and that's a smart way to go because Donald Cerrone, he is one of the highest level. I hate to call him a gatekeeper, but basically he's the guy you beat if you're trying to get to the title. He's got the Uriah Faber, never lost any fight except for a title fight. I mean, it's super rare. Donald Cerrone has an impeccable record for someone keeps up the pace that he does inside the cage. And he's got a fantastic skill set, great striking, great grappling, good frame for 155, and certainly competitive for the 170-pound division. Man, I don't know. I'm kind of smelling the upset on this one. I think Oliveira may have what it takes to dethrone the Cowboy here. But man, Cerrone with Greg Jackson MMA behind him, that's also the X factor. They got the game plan, and Cerrone is so active. The UFC is like his second home. He's like a machine in there. Smart money's definitely on him, but would not be surprised if Cowboy Oliveira came through with the win on this one. Man, I'd hate to get it wrong 2 weeks in a row, but damn it, I'm going with Cerrone.
Going with Cerrone, as I am. I think it's the safe choice here. Donald looking good. I mean, he didn't look great in his last fight, but it was against the champion. And, Alex, I think he takes an L here, but I do seriously think he has a pretty productive UFC career. And I think that does it for the show. Thank you for tuning in. As always, shout outs to all of you who fuck with us on Twitter. Everyone who calls in. The list is too great to go on in detail. Look for us this Sunday. I'm pretty sure we're gonna do one for the Cowboy card. I don't know, because it's a Sunday card. It sort of makes it confusing. I don't know if I'll be up that late after the card, past midnight. But yeah, maybe we'll do it Monday. We'll do it Sunday. I don't know. Follow us on Twitter and keep in touch with us. Pat, you're on Twitter at Sweet Pappy Jones. Anything else for the people before we let them go?
Just want to say thank you for supporting us. Always a pleasure. Love breaking it down with you, Jay. Looking forward to the new format, getting more content to the people out there. It's going to be a beautiful situation, and always love doing it with you.
Hell yeah, my brother. Thank you for joining us tonight, and thank you, the listener, for tuning in. We appreciate all the support we've gotten. Look forward to doing this until the wheels fall off. TheMMAPodcast.com. Like I said, Twitter at the MMA Podcast. And until next time, love you. We gone.
Jake. Tune into the MMA Podcast every Tuesday night.
The wild style, always been a foul child. Will I, sucker? I be the coming like Noah.
The MMA Podcast, Jake is the host. And since Ramsey's been in a wheelchair, the Aunt Jimmy Show has been on a roll. I wanna say John Jones is a host, so I think that I'll pick up the phone and dial 213-457-3380. We got hot takes on the stove. You get blood on your clothes if you're sitting in the front row. I throw on my gi and then I lace the hoops. I'll have Yao lying down cause he ain't the truth. And if Alan wasn't a cop, I'd mention you. And shout out to Ross Finkelstein the Jew. Cause according to you, you're an MMA guru. Approved Bisbing lost his hands, Count Dooku. If you're a fancy boy, you get a 2-minute slot. Mystery wants a title shot. So listen to the MMA Podcast. Throw a high kick, but I block that. Call me Diaz, screaming George, where you at? I want the strap. But you know that I'll never tap. So listen to the MMA Podcast. Throw a high kick, but I block that. Call me Diaz, screaming George, where you at? I want the strap. And you know that I won't tap. Mystery. The MMA Podcast. Most of us just live and breathe this fighting shit. Shout out to Jake. Shout out to Jake.